Sweet world! It's Sunday, May 14, 2023, and welcome on in to Speak Out Them Sunday, a podcast about video games and the video games economy. First off, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. What's up? My name's Atham. I'm a business economist, a former data and public policy analyst, and a current financial analyst. But above all, I'm a video gamist. I play video games, and I'm pretty okay at them. Welcome on into my weekly-ish, who knows, maybe soon to be bi-weekly-ish show, where we explore the intersection of video games, the economy, and the world around us. Join me as I get into analysis of games, video game news, and industry trends. After the show, I usually play something that I've talked about here on Twitch. And I'll also be uploading a VOD to YouTube later with chapters and timestamps, so you can catch it there if that's more convenient for you. What's poppin' YouTube? Also, I'm up there wherever you get podcasts. So if you just search for Speak Atham Sunday, and if it's better for you to have me spit into your ears, then I'm happy to do that. Spit game into your ears. And games, I mean, on games today, it's all about Diablo, baby. And in news, we'll talk about even more Diablo. But there are a few other items that I wanted to touch on as well, including this Zelda character I've been hearing so much about, and a bit of Capcom stuff as well. Yeah, there was also some rumors that are out there about how the EU is going to allow the MS Microsoft Activision merger to proceed in that jurisdiction, but I think we know how that kind of stuff can go already. It can be one message that you know is kind of leaks from behind closed doors, and then once it's time to actually go public, the direction just kind of flips. Let's say after the show, I'll check in with some D2 Resurrected. I would have liked to play some more of that Diablo IV beta that they did here this weekend. But that thing ends like in a couple of hours. That thing ends at 3 p.m. So I won't be able to put that on. So yeah, today I'm going to do something a little different because I've spent quite a bit of time with Diablo IV. I mean, I really only started yesterday, but I poured in maybe 6-7 hours on stream, just kind of rushing through, getting to the level cap of level 20 so that I could, do a couple of things that they had set up there. It was kind of strange, experience, but I think I get, maybe I get what they're trying to do in terms of a testing environment for it. But yeah, so we'll chat about that. And yeah, I mean, I have a new setup now. I have a new camera that I set up, and I changed a bit of the background stuff, changed around some of my scenes. I also installed a hard drive, which was really nice. I had that hard drive sitting around forever, and I was just not doing anything with it. I needed to get a SATA cable. I figured all that out, so that's working well. But yeah, let's get into it. So let's talk games. And so game one, Diablo 1. I have played maybe like 5-6 hours of Diablo 1. I got it a few years ago off of GOG, good old games. I definitely lost my save though, which I remember, like, after losing my save, it kind of like, I think I had gotten past the butcher, and I was like so the butcher is like the first boss in Diablo 1, I think, if I remember correctly, and I lost my save. And after I lost my save, I was like, you know what? I don't feel like doing this. I've seen enough for now. I had half a mind to go back into Diablo 1 today, but with a choice between Diablo 1 or Diablo 2 Resurrected, I'd probably choose Diablo 2 Resurrected. So, but yeah, Diablo 1 it's an action role playing game where you your player character, you pick between a warrior, a rogue, and a sorcerer, and you have to save the town of Tristram from hordes of demons. It's all these developed by Blizzard, right at the time, Blizzard North, and it was published by quite a few publishers. It's a bit, the picture's a bit muddied because if right now we're in 2023 and I'm looking back into a game that was developed and published between 1996 and 1998. But Blizzard themselves published. They had a hard time getting other people on board. Eventually, Electronic Arts came on board, but they were kind of publishing for PlayStation releases, and Ubisoft was also involved in Europe. And then when they did the Hellfire expansion, which would come out in 1997, that was published by Sierra Entertainment. And so they just briefly the game's about basically the town of Tristram you go to. It's under attack by hordes of demons that are pouring out of from beneath the Tristram Cathedral. And so you travel to the town. You're on a quest to save it, and that'll involve you'll have to go into beneath the cathedral there and journey through labyrinths, mazes, catacombs, and so on. And as you go, you'll learn about Diablo and Diablo's plans for the mortal world, all culminating into a final battle against Diablo. The game had this kind of top-down perspective with a point-click type interface. And as you go through, you would run into monsters that you'd have to defeat, right? You'd run into bosses that you'd have to progress. And then you'd find different equipment, different abilities, different spells. And no matter what character you were playing, you had some element of customized ability, right? You could, although not every character was the best at a certain thing, they could all do multiple things with weapons and spells. Really, a really big thing here was there was also a multiplayer mode, an online multiplayer mode, right? So at the time, it was one of the first games to have online multiplayer, which would allow players to team up and complete quests and defeat bosses together. It wasn't the first game to have online multiplayer. I think, it wasn't until 1999 when EverQuest would come out, and that would be, I think, the first kind of commercial success at large scale of an online multiplayer game. But this is like right around the time when all of these online games were really like starting to get out there in real ways in markets. And so, right. So it had this, it's 2D. It's hard to say. There's like different perspectives on what the correct terminology is for it, but it's like this isometric graphics, with 3D models. And the style was really dark and gritty. And as you go through these caves, there are these torches that flicker, and the lighting effects and the darkness, all around you gives it a really grim atmosphere. And when you look back on those models themselves, considering the time, they were really well animated and really really smooth, right? Both the characters and the monsters, very fluid. And one of the things that is a kind of common theme that goes throughout Diablo is the sound effects tie in really well, and the music ties in really well with what they're trying to achieve in their graphic design. The music score composed by Matt Uelmen. It all kind of went together to give it this really dark, gritty feel. Also, it was, so one of the terms that keeps coming up is procedurally generated levels, right? So you don't see the same thing on your playthroughs. You're not guaranteed to walk through the same monsters. and that made it very replayable. You could get a different experience every time you played it. You could see new monsters, for instance, that you didn't see before in your first playthrough. And then you have 3 different characters to try out. And then when Hellfire came out, they added a 4th one, which was the monk. Reviewed really well. When you look at the Metascore now, and you look at user scores, Metascore of 94, user score 8.6 out of 10, like super high quality. I went back on the archives and I tried to find reviews from back in the day, and I pulled I think it was a GameSpot review where Trent Ward said, Diablo is the best game to come out in the past year, and you should own a copy, period. Then when Hellfire came out, it added eight floors to the game. There was a new new boss, like new antagonist or whatever, named Nakrul. There was a whole bunch of quality of life improvements that got added. There were useful merchants. There were difficulty options, which weren't there in the first game. Although strangely, Hellfire did not have multiplayer online. But I don't know. I guess there's some trade-offs that had to be made between whether you try to implement multiplayer online, or do you try to maintain your graphic and art design kind of level of quality, and also within kind of a short turnaround time, right? And yeah, like part of that, the first 2 games, they came out within the span of like what, 2-3 years, like 4 tops. And then ever since then, we've been waiting 10 years at a time before we get Diablos, which is kind of nuts. Yeah, anyway, so again, Hellfire was also really, really good, but not as good as the first one. So the review I found on GameSpot had it at a 7.5 out of 10. And then we go forward to Diablo 2 and Diablo 2 Lords of Destruction. And this is where, I started with Diablo. I still have the physical CDs kicking around some, although I don't think I got them. I think it was my brother who got them. And I think he got them from a friend. And I think those CD keys were already in use. So I have distinct memories of installing this game, not having a CD key, and then going on the internet and trying to find CD key gens to try and break it and get myself in there so I can play the game. Although then, I don't know, I think eventually I might have gone out and bought a copy so that I could get a CD key that I could use so that I could play on Battle.net. It's all a bit fuzzy because the timing of it, like when it was out in, man, I forgot when it came out. I didn't write it down here. I think initial release June of 2000. Yeah, I think at that time I was like, I didn't get it at initial release though, so I came in at Lords of Destruction, which I think was 2002 or maybe 2003. So anyway, I was like 13, 15, somewhere around there, probably. I think that's right. Yeah, it's just a completely different time because now, it's all mostly digital. And even if you go to the store, you just get like a nice empty plastic box with like a little tiny cartridge in it, or like, I don't even know if do you even get CDs anymore? Like, man, I don't, I'm very much a PC gamer. I haven't, the last console generation I was on was PS3 era of stuff. I didn't get onto PS4. I think I could get into PS5 now. I mean, I have a Switch. But even the Switch is, I messed up because I destroyed my Switch because I charged it not inside of the dock. And so that ruined the battery completely. But right about now, I'm waiting for a new console anyway. I'm waiting for that next console to come out before I think I get back on board in a real way. But anyway, back to Diablo 2. Yeah. The other thing was that, you consider at the time, I think for any of the younger players who were getting into it, the other thing was that you could just create an online account. You didn't have to pay for anything. I mean, you pay for the game, but then you wouldn't have to pay a service fee or anything like that. And now looking back at that and looking at different, massively multiplayer online games that do charge regular fees for you to have access to their worlds, it makes me think of why they didn't charge for it back then. But I think it was a combination of it being in nascency, like online games market kind of being in nascency. They're still trying to figure it out. EverQuest was again, like in 1999, really this kind of successful online thing. And then Diablo 2 came out in 2000. It was only just the start. But I think larger scale online games will charge routinely because they're maintaining really huge worlds. And they're maintaining the needs of many players and maintaining the interactions between players, between massive amounts of players, right? And so that definitely comes with continuous costs that need to be offset with continuous revenue. And then the other part of it is that in those MMOs, they're continuously developing new content to keep those players engaged and keep those players inside of those worlds. So, when you look at Diablo, it's very much as is. We'll do some tweaks, we'll do some ladder stuff, and we'll keep players engaged, but we're not going to do too much. We're not going to do new content drops, new stuff like that, not without charging for it. And that's, at that time it came in the form of expansions that would come out 2 years after release, basically, I think is fairly standard. Yeah. And so this also made me think of, what is, I was having this conversation with Falcon, Streaming Falcon, my friend, about what is on your Mount Rushmore of games. And I think Diablo 2 Lords of Destruction is absolutely on my Mount Rushmore of games. I think I have Diablo 2 / Diablo 2 Lord of Destruction. I have Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, although I didn't play it on PlayStation. I played it on emulator because I'm a PC gamer, so I have PlayStation. And Counter-Strike 1.5 and 1.6. Those like are definitely top 3. And I think the 4th would have to be World of Warcraft, even though I'm kind of loath to admit it. But it, like, that game captured me in a way that only those 3 other I mentioned have, in ways that were sometimes unhealthy. Let's just say. I remember there was this one time where it was just around the time when PvP released in World of Warcraft, or like ranked PvP release, something like that, and you could get titles for depending on how many points you got for PvP. And so that summer when they did that, I spent 3 entire months just playing World of Warcraft. I did nothing else. I didn't see my friends. Like, I completely disappeared. I would just hole up wherever the computer was, whether it was either out here or in my room or something. I just holed up and played World of Warcraft PvP on a assassination or combat rogue. I think assassination probably. I cold blood anyway. 3 entire months. I think I only got like rank. I only got to champion or something. I was on the horde side. I only got to champion. It wasn't even the best rank or anything like that. I think I only got to, like, if there were 15, I think I got to rank 10 out of 15 or something. It was, yeah, not worth it. I had to go out and get a health card somewhere around that 3-month mark, and I looked so disheveled in that photo. It's hilarious. I don't know if I have it anymore, but I remember just looking so pale and so just out of it, right? Okay, so that's that aside. Back to Diablo 2. So going through this, I would say Necromancer was definitely my class, of choice, because it was super easy to start off with, and it felt like it wasn't really gear dependent. So it was good to get a early farm with that character. You just focus on summons, and you have a really safe build, and you stand back and watch your summons do all the work, basically, right? There was also later on there is this Median XL. It's called Median XL. It's a mod that completely changes the game around and does all kinds of weird stuff to talent trees. I did mess around a bit with that as well, and I played Necromancer there, but in that game you could play a melee Necromancer because it's a mod. They modded stuff. So yeah, Diablo 2, they had the same designers as Diablo 1. It's David Brevik, Eric and Max Schaefer. At the end of Diablo, Diablo themselves are sealed into a soulstone, and then the hero, one way or another, drives that soulstone into their forehead, hoping to keep Diablo under wraps. And so when you get into D2, you're picking a new player character, right? You're playing a new character, and you're following this, the story kind of follows along this Dark Wanderer. And the Dark Wanderer, you find out later, is the player that you played in Diablo 1 at the very end, who has the soulstone in their head, right? And so that hero is now wandering about trying to stay sane, basically, struggling to contain Diablo. And everywhere they go, just evil starts sprouting all around, right? So yeah, you come in as this hero who's looking to put an end to the evils surrounding the Dark Wanderer. Early on, you'll meet a famous character named Deckard Cain. Stay a while and listen. It's a non-player character, a Herodric scholar who will guide you on your journey as you learn about and defeat the lesser, the greater, and the prime evils. And so, in this game, there are like several evils. They're the powers of hell, basically, right? You'll go through 5 of them. You'll go through Andariel, the Maiden of Anguish, Duriel, the Lord of Pain, Baal, the Lord of Destruction. That's in the expansion. Mephisto, the Lord of Hatred, and Diablo, Lord of Terror. So you'll do that. In reality, though, it was pretty simplistic. It was really cool how they laid it out. They put it out in acts. It's also one of these games where, it was one of the first games that I played that was really had this really high production value for cinematics. So it really felt like you were playing through theater in a sense, but and so those acts kind of dress it up, but really what you're doing is you're going point A to point B, and you're killing damn near everything, and every single thing is without a doubt evil, without question. And so you don't really worry about having to call them at all. And if you were being critical, you would say, hey, this is pretty repetitive. This is incredibly repetitive, and the story isn't maybe the most original. But these games have always been about the combat, I think, or at least that's always been the strongest thing that it hinges on. And the combat was amazing in this game. The combat and the smooth graphics, the cool animations, the varied enemy designs, the varied kind of enemy attack patterns, all that kind of stuff. You've got pygmy, serpents, zombies, skeletons, big demons, small demons, all kinds of stuff, and really cool boss designs. Unique kind of bosses with their own kind of mechanics that you have to learn and figure out how to deal with. And so when you look at Diablo 2, it's really this game that doubled down on combat, and they built systems around it to make it varied and interesting. You could choose between Amazon, a necromancer. So an Amazon is like a javelin or either melee or thrown type of character. A necromancer who could summon or shoot bones at range. A barbarian is just a warrior that can do a bunch of whirlwinds. A sorcerer or sork, or a sorceress in this game, but a sork. Powerful spells, overpowered teleport, and a paladin, a holy warrior that had these kind of balanced offensive and defensive abilities. The expansion then would add 2 more characters, the druid, which would have werewolf and bear transformations. So you'd transform into either one of those 2, depending on how you put points into talent trees. And then you'd also have the ability to summon, woodland creatures like wolves, ravens, and you also had nature spells, so you could, do stuff with vines. And then there's also an assassin that got added into the in the expansion there, which there was like builds there where you would be using claw weapons or you'd be using traps. The other thing in this game is that you would be able to hire mercenaries to help you on your journey, and that was kind of a cool, useful thing especially if you were playing alone offline, which is something that you could do. With both Diablo 1 and Diablo 2. You could play completely offline if you wanted to. And so the loop was incredibly simple, although very effective. And that's, you create this bear and baron character. You go out there and you kill monsters. You get loot. You bring it back to town. Sort through it, equip stuff, go back out there, kill shit, get better stuff, equip that, get rid of the old stuff, and keep doing that, right? But I mean, as you go on, there would be kind of additional mechanics and systems that would come into play. Like there was, different type of vendors, different type of currencies that you could use. There was one vendor where you could gamble on stuff and you could get a really high quality item, but you didn't know what you were going to get. There was also different ways to do some crafting stuff with gems and runes and a couple of in-game items that would allow you to combine things together. And there was a huge breadth of items, weapons, armor, all kinds of things in the game to kind of sift through. And so with many different types of vendors and all these different types of equipment and gear that went hand in hand with the varied options in these talent trees for the particular characters you were playing, where you could create really unique, very customizable builds for those characters and really play your own way. That being said, there would always end up being like it would really feel like there would always end up being something that's clearly better than something else, and you would find that out either through experimentation, but more likely through going online, going onto forums, and seeing what people are saying about what are their builds and what seems to work better than others. As you level up through the game, you put points into different stats. So there's strength, basically damage, dexterity, damage, and dodge stat. Vitality is life and energy, I think, or like your stamina bar, and then I think stamina was your. Gosh, I'm blanking on that anyway. 4 stats to put into that would control your life, your attack, your dodge, and how long you could run for, basically. And there must have been, there's also a stat there for mana as well. And you get all kinds of skill points, which you can plan out, but your choices matter, and you have to be a little bit careful about what you would do with them, because I think you do get a reset, and you could get additional resets, but they would be quite expensive. And so you'd have to be careful. I think the more effective way to create and test and try new builds would either just be to hack it or to create a new character and get them power leveled which, there were various ways to get power level. You just have a higher level character run you through stuff really quickly to get you all the experience. Like the cow level. And if you know, you know. And also there was BattleNet. So multiplayer came back in this game, and that was huge to be able to play with your friends online and to compete in ladders. I remember, for the time when I was sitting down and playing it, I remember the graphics being cool as hell. Again, I must have been somewhere around 13 to 15, something like that. And I don't know that it was kind of like best in class for the time, but also for the time, like the computer that we had was a piece of trash, a really expensive computer, but also a piece of trash. Like, I don't even know I think it had onboard graphics at first, and I managed to convince my parents to go out and get like some ATI Radeon graphics cards that we could put in there. And like, then at that point, that like Pentium 1.7 gigahertz or whatever the fuck it was the problem. It was the bottleneck after you get like a better video card in there. So yeah, it was just like that computer was ridiculous, like a $3,000 just ridiculous overpriced bullshit machine. But Diablo it could handle, because it wasn't too demanding, and yet it still looked quite good with what they were able to do with it, with their stylistic choices. And so, all of that came together to really, convince me that this game was the absolute shit, and that I needed to be playing more of it. And so, yeah, I mean, to those that had maybe more highfalutin tastes, it might have not been so appealing, but to me, especially 15-year-old me, like, it was right on the money. Yeah. The other thing about this, though, is like, I don't know how many times I've replayed the music on Diablo, like the Diablo soundtrack, Diablo II soundtrack in particular. Like my fondness might be now maybe more related to nostalgia than anything else, but I just remember really being kind of in awe of it, and I just hold it in high regard. It had a Metascore rating of 88, user score rating 8.8. Again, they had these procedurally generated levels, so there's a certain component of randomization in the stages. Some stages, like some areas, would always be the same, but some would be completely randomized. Although, I mean, procedural generation is like, basically you're feeding an algorithm that it has instructions written to create things. But so you give it instructions on what to create, and then you use you use computers so that you can leverage randomization through random number generators, and then spin off various ways of combining different assets that have already been created together to create which like a tile that you're looking for, and then you just do that over and over again until you build out something that's completely random, right? Although I don't know, maybe it's like pseudo random, because it's kind of like if you had a really big deck and you kept shuffling that deck, eventually as you draw a hand, you'll start to recognize some of the pieces, but they might not be in the same order. You might start to recognize some of the cards, but they might not be in the same order. Anyway, different characters to try out, lots of builds to try out. The ladders would encourage you to keep playing and keep creating new characters. If you didn't, after a certain point, if you didn't, your characters would get deleted, so you'd have to keep logging in. And it was buffeted by forums and active places on the internet to chat about optimal builds. And so, Diablo 2 is absolutely my favorite out of all the Diablo games. Three and expansions, but anyway, Diablo 2 and Lords of Destruction are my favorites. And even though probably I spent more time in Diablo 3. As that was more of a function of just age and where I was in life, a little bit older, a little bit more money, a little bit more time, and skill anyway, to be able to play these kind of games. But I still don't look back on Diablo 3 as fondly as I do on Diablo 2. Yeah, so that's where I'll leave Diablo 2. Which of course takes us to Diablo 3. And Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls, which is the expansion. Diablo 3, if I have to like do it in 3 points, I say point 1, this game was a fucking mess when it came out, and it was a sore disappointment. Point 2, the entire thing got reworked, and it got shored up into an actual good ass game, regardless of whatever the reviews said before or after the rework. And then number 3, Reaper of Souls was a good expansion, but it didn't really change the paradigm. It was kind of more of the same, just fixed systems. And I will say that the storyline did capture my interest, whereas before it was like, I mean, it's a cool dressing up of stuff, but you're kind of just A to Bing it. So, Diablo 3, right? So, developed and published by Blizzard, of course. Released in May 15, 2012. So that's actually, again, shoutouts, Streaming Falcon, Streaming Falcon and Lady Streaming Falcon's birthday. And yeah, I mean, it was just a mess when it came out. The director, Jay Wilson, it was a change in guard from Diablo 2 time, Diablo 2 days. And so since Diablo 2 came out, that was in 99, it had been something like 10 to 12 years. And so there was like a lot of pent up demand for a new Diablo, and a really anxious fan base for it to be good, and for it to be, another one of those, another one of what they wanted to see, what they loved so much about Diablo 2, just kind of refreshed and brought forward 10 years. When it first released, the devs, like the Blizzard, was completely overwhelmed by the volume of players that wanted to play. And so the servers couldn't handle it. So you'd most of the time you'd be just unable to play. You'd be waiting in queue. You would not know how long that queue was going to take. And then if you at some point you could get bumped out of the queue. There's a famous error 37, which it says, "The servers are busy at this time. Please try again later," in brackets, error 37. And then, if you did get in, your connection to the servers could be turbulent at best. And if you got dropped, you'd have to get back in queue. It was borderline unplayable. And then to add insult to injury, you had to be connected to the servers at all times. And that was unlike Diablo 2, where you could play offline if you wanted to. And so when I look back on that, it's just like, man, like a lot of these things, there just seems to never be enough server capacity when they're launching these games. And I feel like that's I get on the business side why you wouldn't, why you'd want to under budget for that stuff. You don't want to just buy a whole bunch of servers that maybe you're not going to need, if the issue is going to be more about how do you handle the network, like the flow, the network flow into those servers and their configuration. I mean, and the server side, like the equipment itself, it's not necessarily like cars where you buy a car, you take it off the lot, and it immediately drops, like depreciates in value significantly. But there is some aspect of that. If you buy equipment and you're not in the business of selling servers, then and let's say that your vendor doesn't accept returns, not or even they won't accept returns after 30 days. Now you might be sitting with a significant amount of servers that you've bought, an expense that you've taken, and now you don't know what you're going to do about it. You have to spend time and focus on trying to deal with that issue when your real business is supposed to be trying to manage a product launch successfully. And so it's better to err on the side of less. And then, hey, do we need more, or do we need to take more expense in a certain area so that we can improve the experience? Okay, now we know the issue. We'll go deal with it, and yeah, we'll have to deal with some flack, but we'll deal with it, and we'll do it as soon as possible. Type of thing, as opposed to trying to approach it the other way around. But yeah, I went back and I tried to find some articles, kind of retelling the story here. And I found one from Steve Watts here. It's a GameSpot article. This was written May 15th, 2022. So last year to the day. So, one of the points he makes here is that in D2, you used to be able to leave your game at any time, and you'd be able to pop in wherever you were. And so in D3, it was very different. It was all instanced. If you left and then you came back, you'd pop into your last checkpoint, and that would be in a new instance of the game. So if you had, for instance, if you had cleared enemies or stuff like that, they'd all come back, right? And it would all be kind of different, right? There's another thing I read here is John Walker from Rock Paper Shotgun wrote, "A single player game that won't pause, and if you leave it running, it'll boot you out and cancel your progress." Then the other thing that was here with this game was that they had something called the Real Money Auction House, or the RMAH, or ARMA is kind of how I refer to it in short form. And so when you look at that ARMA, that auction house, the whole thing around it was like they needed to find a way to internalize trading of items outside of the game, which was absolutely a thing in Diablo II, because certain items, rare items, were really hard to find, and there were other people who were out there who were willing to pay a lot of currency, either in-game or real money currency, to buy them. So then you can end up in these situations where people are gouging other people for stuff. You don't want to. You want to make sure that you're not going to get in any legal trouble for any of this. And so, they wanted to try and bring it in, make it officially a part of the player economy, simultaneously as a way to improve the experience in the game and to cut out that black market economy. And it became a problem because coupled with a game that had at launch had so many issues with being able to play the thing. The other thing that was going on was that there was ridiculously low drop rates. You were mostly pulling in trash, and then the few little good items that you would get, particularly to your character, they might have not had much value, but to other characters, they might have had some value, because they might have actually been good items, just not useful to you. Well, then part of the gameplay loop then is that you have to stash that, and you have to take that to the Real Money Auction House, and you have to sell it there because you need gold, and then you'll use that gold to buy other items on the auction house that are relevant for your character, so that you can progress through the game. And if you didn't have time to do all of that and get all the gold, then you had the option of spending real money to buy all of that. And Activision Blizzard took a cut of every transaction, service fee. And yeah, and this was right around the time when Activision had bought Blizzard, and so Blizzard fans were on the lookout for these for like scummy practices, basically. And so when we all saw that they were taking a cut, it was kind of sus, right? It was super sus. And so, you had the real money auction house, and then you had always online, you had anti-cheat, and so that reinforced the need for always online. You needed anti-cheat because if you have a real money auction house, then you've got to prevent people from being able to hack things. For instance, like you need to prevent people from being able to duplicate items so that they can just keep throwing free stuff, like to them free, up on the auction house and make real money off of it. Yeah. Yeah. And if you didn't try to do that, then you'd have hackers and exploiters who would find ways to game the system for gold, and then turn that into illicit activity, like gold selling. But at the time, the game had massive issues with loot. As I say, you had to spend so much time just trying to get anything worthwhile, and the slog was really just unfun, and stop people from grinding it out. And then in 2013, Jay Wilson is outbound. He's gone, and then in comes Josh Mosquera as the new director of the game. And then in 2014, they'd released the Reaper of Souls expansion, and that expansion fixed many of the issues of the original game, but it didn't drastically change what the gameplay loop was about. The real money auction house got removed, and then the chances of getting good loot was improved. And so essentially that whole gameplay loop of having to feed into a real money auction house so you can buy things and then go play the game, that's cut out. And now you can just play this game. And you can be kind of self-sustaining, self-sufficient inside of it without having to rely on trading. And that's really where it turns from garbage to gem, for me. And I think that's the overall perspective that I see out there on this. When you look at the plot, like the story was actually quite good for me. Some of the choices inside of that story, especially near the end, I didn't really like. And I would have liked to see it go a different way, but that's not necessarily a knock on how it was written. In terms of character choice, you could choose between a barbarian, which returning from Diablo II. You could choose a wizard, which is kind of like a sorcerer or sorceress from Diablo II. There was a witch doctor, which was kind of similar to a necromancer, but kind of similar to a druid as well. So you didn't see a necromancer until much later when they would add some sort of DLC for that. And you definitely didn't see the druid. And then in the expansion, they'd add a crusader, which was kind of similar to a paladin, but seemingly more like more defensive than offensive. And when you look at the systems, they were completely different from Diablo 2. I feel like when it first came out, the randomization, the procedural generation of levels wasn't particularly great. You would really recognize a lot of the same kind of layouts a lot of the time, but it got better over time, I will say. But the skill system is really kind of where it fell apart to me. Because, in Diablo 2, what you used to be able to do is you had like many different function keys running across the top of your keyboard, and you could assign all kinds of shit to all kinds of keys. You weren't just limited into basically 4 button slots and left click and right click, right? And that's the direction that they went with Diablo 3, and it looks like it's similar in Diablo 4, where you've got, maybe 4 abilities to use on your left hand and 2 abilities to use on your right hand. But there's so many more abilities in the game. Like that part of it drives me wild, because there could, if you would like get rid of that handicap or like that limitation, there would be so much more possibility of things that you can combine together in interesting ways. And that would be my preference for a game. I think like that's, when playing Diablo 3, I would look for ways to be able to drop like all kinds of abilities that I didn't want to use, like to the point where, one of the mechanics is like, you'll have abilities that generate a certain type of resource, and then you have abilities that spend a certain type of resource, right? But, if I only have access to 6 slots, and I don't like any of those generators, then I'd look for ways to make builds that would make it so I don't have to use a generator. I just use spenders, and I'll just have to find ways through either like the stats or the gear that I get, all that kind of stuff, so that I can just make it so that I have infinite or near infinite resource, so I can just keep spending. But I think that's pretty atypical. That's not the way that it was intended to be played necessarily, right? It's, the way it was intended to be played is like, oh, you have this generator, pick a spender, pick a movement option, pick an ultimate type of thing, pick like a ranged option, pick a defensive option, like, which like, it just feels excessively rigid in a way that's not fun. But I kept going because it's Diablo, and I really like Diablo 2, and I really wanted to like Diablo 3. So I just kept going. The other thing with that is that, in Diablo 3, you would just unlock everything. You would just level up, and every single skill would get unlocked. And then it was up to you to swap them around. Some skills seemed obviously trash and would never see the light of day for me. And it just felt like you would definitely in this game be channeled into a most optimal path, like a most optimal way to build a character, which sucks. Incredibly boring experience there. Yeah, like the other thing is that if you unlock things, like if you unlock all the things for free, then you kind of don't have much incentive to look at all of the ways to that you could combine these different things, right? Whereas if you have it in a tree where you have to actively look and spend things through it and see how those things fit together, and if you mess up, then you have to take stuff out and try again. It's a better practical way to get you to look at all of the things that are going on. To me anyway, it feels like a better way to get you to look at all of these things and look at how you can make different combinations of things. And so, yeah, back to what I say, Diablo, it's always been about the combat. And later on, the loot would be fixed. You'd be able to pull off some interesting things. You'd use legendary set bonuses and all of that. But it felt limited, and it felt limiting in a way that it just didn't need to be. And yeah. So anyway, so when it's fine. I've already talked about procedural generation. I'm not going to go into that. I'm not going to go super deep into that, but when I think about the graphics, and about however long it took for things to get stabilized from the launch, some months later, I'd get back into it. I'd get back through it, and although the game looked good, it was markedly brighter than the first game. It was more colorful. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that choice moved the game further away from what the first two achieved with a really dark gloomy and gritty feel, which is what my nostalgia was kind of tied to. And so you play that game and you know it's Diablo, it's a Diablo in name, and it kind of looks like a Diablo, it kind of resembles a Diablo, but it doesn't feel the same type of Diablo as what you're used to. It looked fine, looked good, but you know, I just like some of the other Blizzard stuff too. I just wish that some of the graphic fidelity was higher in it, because I think at the time it could have been. And the voice acting was really good. It felt, you know, the game felt better tuned into trying to immerse players into the story. There were plenty of audio journals to find. There were bestiary things you could read, lore pieces you could read and go through. And so like a lot of attention to detail was there. And so that does deserve credit for sure, for that kind of like that attention to world building. But yeah, I mean, ultimately though, like bottom line, if you were someone like me at the time, you were interested because it had been 10 to 12 years since you really were into Diablo 2. And you were hoping for something that looked like a Diablo 2 refresh, but you didn't get that. And what you first got was something that was extremely broken. And then, whatever, like maybe 4 months to a year later or whatever it was, you'd have something that was playable but had core issues, like really core flaws in the game design. You know, the real money auction house and shit for loot, which further soured your taste for the game. But then you kept on because you're a Diablo fan and, you know, you're into the top-down, whatever it is, isometric or axonometric or parallel projection style of game, whatever the hell the genre is called. And you're also a Path of Exile fan and you want something that meets that desire that you have for Diablo 2, but D3 just didn't fit the bill. And then the Reaper of Souls expansion came out, and then their Loot 2.0 thing came out, which fixed a lot of the issues with the loot that you'd get, the items that you'd be able to get in the game. The real money auction house came the fuck out of the game. And then there was also a rift system that got introduced. Bounties were introduced. New different ways were introduced for you to engage with the game. And then you had regular kind of new content came out in seasons, which were basically ladders. And so at that point, then you had the makings of an actual good ass game. And a legit good game that had well-deserved favorable reviews for it. And that takes us to Diablo IV. And I guess if we're looking at the blueprint of all of these Diablos, then we're also looking forward to an expansion to Diablo IV that will come at some point. I would guess if they're following any of these timelines, then something like 2 years after release, you could probably expect an expansion. So again, it's Activision Blizzard developed and published. It's going to release June 6th, 2023, although people who have already paid for it will have early access to it starting on June 2nd. And I think this goes in the whole, like the beta that they've just done and giving early access to the people who have already bought it is kind of like a dual way where they're paying attention to the Diablo fans, to their community that they have, but they're also using them in a way to stagger release, and to also test. If anything goes wrong in between June 2 and June 6, they'll know and they'll hear about it, and then they'll fix it before June 6, which is really when they need people to buy this freaking game who haven't pre-ordered. And so, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's kind of like I look at it as kind of like a free QA test in certain aspects. And obviously I haven't gone too far into the game. Like I say, I've probably only spent maybe 6-7 hours playing it. And so I won't be able to talk about it in a fulsome way. That'll come later after I really sink my teeth in and spend some real time with it. This is just a beta test, although they had some, they got really flashy with their marketing, and they licensed, like they got the Space Jam song out there. They have a trailer on their YouTube using the Space Jam song, because they called it the server slam. So welcome to the jam. And this test was weird, man. It was really weird. It like you're capped at level 20, but they intentionally left things in there that were higher than level 20, 25 plus, all the way up to level 30 were things that you could run into. If you tried to go anywhere outside of the zone that you were allowed, the pathways were open, but you would get like a nice warning message that would tell you we're going to teleport you back if you don't turn around right now. So, there was a limited, or maybe 7 waypoints type of space. The first thing that you'll notice is that when they're talking about non-linear gameplay, they're like in some of the promotion materials, they're mentioning that, they're touting that. I think it's true. They don't explain well, or at least I didn't find good explanations of what that means. But I think it's true to a certain extent, because there are going to be, you'll go through main story quest lines, right? You'll go through main story stuff, and you're not going to have a choice in that story, right? Like you don't have choices, right? And even if you did, they wouldn't matter. The story's going to go the way the story's going to go, and your character might have some dialogue in it. But if one NPC decides to go off into somewhere where you don't necessarily want to, you're going to follow that NPC because that's the way it's been written. But in terms of when you have to do that and how you're going to approach it, whether you're going to go directly there or you're going to go some other direction or try some other thing, some side story thing, maybe you'll try to go to a dungeon, all that kind of stuff. It all plays out on this kind of wide, expansive map, where it's instance in a sense, but you're not following linear paths to get to where you need to go. Like you're not, whereas in Diablo 3, some of those, a lot of that game just kind of feels like, all right, well, I'll get in here and I'm just going to hug the left wall. And eventually, if I just keep hugging the left wall, I'm going to get out of this maze, right? And this game doesn't feel like that, because when you're out there in the overworld, it's expansive, and it feels like an MMO in that sense. Like you can run north, south, east, west. You have a journal, and you can pop open, you can track what it is that you want to accomplish first, and go ahead and do that. There's no, in these kind of ARPG games, usually one of the things that you have is a overlay type of map that you usually press the tab key for, and then you can see your character in the game, but you can also see this overlay of a map that's on top of you, like maybe an outline of it, so you can keep track of where you are in the maze. There isn't that here. There's a map, and then if you close the map goes up into a mini map at the top right of your screen. And I think that's totally fine. I think maybe purists, or people who are holding on to what they think Diablo is and what they think these games are, will be irritated with that and want to see it. But I think for me, when I play this game, it feels like that overlay type of thing is not necessary and would just be counter to what it is that they're trying to achieve creatively, which is to get you to focus on the world that you're in, and to get you to explore it and to look around in things. And so if you were to have an overlay outline, your attention would focus on just following these kind of like the outlines of it, rather than just looking around and seeing actually in the world where you can go and what you can do. And that it works out because there's, even if there are paths where things look like in Diablo 3, they would have been a dead end, they give you traversal options, which, I mean, basically it's a hit of a key. You hit a space bar, but you can get across gaps, right? So you're never like, it never really felt like I wasn't often dead ended where I was like, oh shit, well, this was the wrong path and I have to go back, right? It always felt like really fluid, and I was really encouraged to explore, and exploring was fun. So I kept exploring. One thing I will say that I wasn't aware of going in was how multiplayer it would actually be. And so like I knew that there was going to be some aspect of like just random players popping in and stuff like that, but I thought it was restricted to when you have a world boss type of events, right? And so when you pop into an instance of the whole world, I think maybe maximum 12 people can be in there. It's something like that. But those 12 people are in that same instance with you. And so you can run into them anywhere in it. And I'm not like, it's hard to say because with a lot of these games, when you're out of screen, you can't see what the hell's happening. So I'm not sure how it's being handled in the background. I have a feeling that like monsters just must be respawning then, because otherwise there wouldn't be enough shit to kill if you're sharing it with 12 other people. Or maybe like because the map is like, so you have like this big map, but it's kind of broken out into different sectors on it in weird kind of shapes. And so maybe those sectors are their own, it could be that they're their own individual instances. I'm not sure how that works, but I, from time to time I'd run into other people. It didn't ruin my experience. It was fine. Most of the time, actually pretty much all the time, nobody talked. Like you just kind of run on. You can also play cross-platform, so it could also be that you're playing with console players who don't really have access to a keyboard anyway. There are emotes. There's an emote wheel, so you can go fool around with the emote wheel and say hello and cheer and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. The other thing that was here was so the skill trees, right? So there are skill trees again, and you can go through. And from what I have played so far, I can say that I was definitely encouraged to be constantly looking at the skill tree and figuring out, where I can take points out of and what I need to be slotting them into to help me succeed in a certain challenge that I was at. Like I got stuck at a few places, and I needed to figure out, all right, how do I flip this around for this specific fight so that I can succeed at it. There was one of the fights, there's these things called strongholds. They're basically like big enemy encampments that you have to, take quite some time. It can take like half an hour to clear these things out as you go through, and they'll typically culminate, although I don't think always, but they will have like some sort of boss fight basically. And like one of these boss fights, this was one of them where the boss fight was level 30 and you're capped at level 20, and it was just ridiculous. Like it was so hard and so frustrating to try and get through that I almost gave up. But at a certain point there, I realized, like I stopped and I realized that I was banging my head against the wall for no good reason. And I hadn't taken a look at my skills and abilities. I hadn't considered what might be useful in the fights. And then I realized that I was like, hey, okay, fine. Usually actual boss characters can't be affected by a lot of the crowd control mechanics that are in games like stuns or freezes and stuff like that. But other enemies can. And in that particular fight, I was having real issues with the amount of enemies that were getting thrown at me. And I was like, well, hang on. They've given me options in the skill tree to do things with crowd control that could actually play out to my advantage. Also, I had I was playing a necromancer, so I had some curse that would reduce enemy damage output. And so when I combined those two things together, even though I was 10 levels below, I was able to just barely get through And I was able to do that because I had stopped and thought strategically about what it is that I need to do to get through this particular fight. And that's the same thing with the world boss. There's this big thing that's going on. I was talking with Falcon about this yesterday. There's this world boss that's out there, level 25 plus. I think if you get them within the span of the test, you get some special item. People thought it was going to be a mount, but it's not a mount. It's like some accessory that goes onto a mount, whatever the hell it is. It's really annoying for a lot of people who are sharing their feelings with the dev team on Reddit, because it's a situation where you might take time into looking into your character, looking into your skills, looking into your gear, all the different ways that the game has given you these options in this test to try and see how you can succeed against this thing that is 5 levels above you, that you shouldn't really be in until 5 more levels, or at least 3 or 4. And so you're doing that so that you can win the thing. But you have other players who are just kind of like just loading in. Maybe they're level 9, they're level 12, and they're like, oh, there's a dragon. There's a big dragon. And if we beat the dragon, we get a reward. So I have to run to this dragon. Right. And so you have people that are just kind of dragging down the efforts. And then so what that ends up doing is it's a grab bag. You can be really lucky, and you can get a really good group of people who are like all have their shit together and do really well. You can get carried. You can be really lucky that you get carried. It's super ironic because even those people who got carried don't get any credit because you had to be level 20 to get credit. And I think that highlighted a major issue where if you're going to have these open world kind of things, you need to have a way to have controls over what level, like there's got to be some minimum bar of level that can even join that particular instance for the world boss, however you're going to do that. If I guess it would have to be kind of like phasing type of stuff where, if you're too low, maybe gatekeep it. Maybe you can't even get in if you're too low. Or maybe if you are too low, you're going to get phased out with other people that are too low, and only the people who get phased in are going to be phased in together are going to be at the same level or higher, some minimum bar or higher. So that's the thing there with Ashava. I think it's Ashava. I keep adding an R. I don't know why. Yeah. The other thing is that I, by accident, I completely skipped all the tooltips. It's an option that you have when you create a character, because I thought that was going to be I thought that was the choice between hard mode and not hard mode, but like they give you different difficulty options, basically easy or normal, I think. Yeah, I got confused. I thought that deny tooltips option was like normal or whatever, and so then I just didn't have tooltips. I'm sure if I went into my settings, I'd be able to reset it, but I didn't. Credit to the game though. It was a good thing to see if it would be intuitive enough just by itself if I didn't read any of the tooltips. For the most part, it was. I had to ask a few questions here and there on things, but for the most part, just poking around the different menus, I figured out what the things were. But that's me as a Diablo player that has played all the Diablos to a certain extent. I can't say too much about the actual game content so far because the game's not even out yet. But so far, what I have seen, and I skipped a lot of it so that I could get to level 20 and finish the stuff. But the narrative seems fine. Like there's nothing that's turning me off. The graphics and the art design also take it in a really, for me, takes it in a really good direction where I want it to be. It's definitely darker. It's definitely more depraved. And it's gritty and it's kind of bloody and nasty and I love it. It's what I want in a Diablo. Music's good, which is par for the course. And music has always been good in Diablo. yeah, I'm thankful for that, because they're in other action RPGs that I've played before, like Path of Exile. You know, like Path of Exile, that music is just so terrible. I really don't like it. I have to turn it off when I'm playing. But when I was playing yesterday, I was really into it. And definitely turning it off was the farthest thing in my mind. You know, and so when I take a step back and look at the entire game and what's on offer, I think at its core, it has all these elements coming together that could set it up to be a really good game, and something that stands apart from Diablo 3, and will not require 2 additional years of work and fixes and leadership changes before it becomes really good, right? Before it becomes a gem. But there is a risk with this game, and that's how the season passes and how the monetization will work in the game. The monetization, basically, like those season passes, how they work, they're basically all they are all 100% cosmetic type of things. One parallel you can make is if you've played a game like Rocket League before, and you know there's a rocket pass that you can get, where you play the game, as you keep playing you'll achieve things that are on this pass. As you keep achieving things, you'll earn certain rewards. You buy a season pass, which will, funny enough, is going to be tied to fiscal quarter. Surprise! So every 3 months probably, and the goal is that as you keep playing, you put in an amount of time over 3 months, you'll be able to achieve everything on that, and you'll get your money's worth. You pay them the money up front, and at the end of it, if you play through, you'll get your money's worth. But what can happen if if a third of your time is spent on working and a third of your time is spent on your family, and then the other third of your time is either sleeping or not sleeping and playing games, then you can spend a whole bunch of money on a pass, play a little bit, play as much as you can, and the entire rest of it goes to waste. Right? And then you feel really bad about that. And then you don't want to do that anymore. But then you see all these other people running around in this game that have all these cool ass wicked things. And maybe there's other ways for you to do catch-ups, and there's a way that they've figured out how to do some pricing stuff to give you an accelerated pass or something like that. But it just feels really scummy, and that kind of stuff turns me off, actually. And so I'm hoping that it won't, because I really want this to be good, and I really want to spend a lot of time in it because it's a Diablo game and I love Diablo. But ultimately, if the season passes turn me off enough, I'll have to move on. And I don't know, maybe I'll just play D2 Resurrected, or I'll just move on and play something else, man. Yeah. So that's it. Sorry, that's it for Diablo 4. I'm definitely looking forward to it. That's coming out soon. Maybe about 2-ish kind of weeks here. 3 weeks. End of 3 weeks I'll have access to it. And then June 2nd, eh? Yeah. Okay. So hey, why don't we take a break? I've been going on for quite some time now. So I'm going to take a break here. And I'll come back on the other side of it with the news. So we'll be back. Hang tight. Hey, what's going on? We're back. It's time for the news, y'all. So, first item is, again, Diablo 4. The Diablo 4 dev team did a an update stream, a developer update stream. It had Adam Fletcher, the community lead. It had Joseph Piapiora, associate game director on Diablo 4, Joe Shelley, game director on Diablo 4, and Riker, Diablo content creator. Yeah, which was a bit kind of odd for me anyway to see, because on the one hand, it's smart to have a content creator on your panel, because then you get like a inside link to the community, I guess. But that's also dependent on how much the entire community knows who the person is and like what that's about. And I would venture that maybe not everybody knew who this guy is. So, and I mean, he's out there, he's on YouTube, and he does great stuff there. But it's like, I saw like a lot of forum posts, a lot of even like reaction YouTube videos and stuff going like, oh dude, what is this about? Is he being paid to be there? Is he not being paid to be there? Like, it would be smart for Activision if you are paying them, because they can give you insight on what will work and what won't. And at the same time, you can kind of get a little bit of insurance that they're not going to say anything too bad about you. But so that was a weird aside that was there. On that dev update, they talked about the 5 classes that'll be in the game. So you have a barbarian, you have a sorcerer making a return for that. You saw that in Diablo 2. A rogue, which you saw in Diablo 1. A druid, which you saw in Diablo 2. And a necromancer. D2 expansion, also much later on, came out to D3. And is now in D4. And a lot of customization options, which played out, which is there when I was creating my character, right? You can choose different facial structures, hairstyles, skin colors, eye colors, markings, all kinds of stuff. There's also, like, right out the gate, you have access to transmog, or like, the ability to change your character's clothes appearance. There's also skill tree we talked about. There's also a paragon tree that'll come on later. So it's like, basically once you max out your level and you max out your skills, you'll gain more experience in these additional paragon levels, and you'll, gives you a few more different stats and how you can allocate and tweak your, what it is that your character's trying to do in your build. And they talked a little bit about legendary items and how they'll offer additional effects and powers and stuff like that. I think, again, when it started, they had the tagline and marketing angle about non-linear story, but I'm not sure that they actually talked about what that meant. And the knock on these games has always been that they're unoriginal and repetitive type of storyline and loops. But it works because the combat's always been really good. At least for me in Diablo 2, it really worked because the combat was really good there. They also said, and this is a kind of important part to call out, is that they said that they were committed to letting players play the game their way. And we've heard that before, but I'm not exactly holding my breath, because with a lot of these things, you just end up whittling down a list of things and choices until, you've been left with something that's optimal or clearly better than the other. And so, but yeah, like I did, again, like when I was playing, I did get in situations where I do need to tweak skills, but there are also some other skills that are in that skill tree that I'm completely ignored. Like they were completely not appealing, didn't seem useful at all. But I'm sure as you continue to play the game, as more things unlock in that skill tree, as you get different gear pieces and all that kind of stuff, then maybe those things start to have a place in a way that you can build together. That makes sense to me. And so the other thing to think about here, and this is from Andrea Sharon at IGN. Talking about the seasons and how they're going to work, right? So they're going to be tied to financial quarters. Don't call them ladders, they're seasons. And they'll have themed content, iterating on the base game, introducing fresh concepts and ideas into the world of Sanctuary. New gameplay mechanics, new characters, quest lines, items, and balancing changes to the classes. Which, I mean, that kind of frightens me because, you know, what if you've invested a whole bunch of time into something? Like, it becomes this whole, like, Warcraft trap. World of Warcraft trap where you've invested your entire time into one particular thing, and now a balance change comes in some next season, and now you were playing a necromancer and they were pretty good, but now all the summons suck ass, and so now you got to start again and do something else, I guess, like that. I really hope that doesn't happen, and I have a feeling that it very well might, because you always run that risk when you're gonna go and do a bunch of balance shit on a 3-month basis. Yeah, once they in the stream, Rod Ferguson, who is the I think he's the lead director, he's general manager of the project. He said that the story allowed the team to create quests and mechanics that are not bound by the campaign. So you're creating quest lines in the open world that can be completely different and not constrained to, it has to be about the narration level of story. It can be about anything that's interesting that you want to play in an open world. So all of that I think is very cool. And I think that'll work. I just, one thing that I think sucks is the tie towards the regular money stream that they're trying to get out of it is a little bit obvious, and it kind of sucks. Like, I don't know, the ship has long since sailed on being able to just throw down $60, now $70 US. Gonna probably $90 Canadian pretty soon here. And moved into a game and moved on. That's gone. Now you'll pay that same entry fee, and then you'll pay a little bit more in regular kind of streams for the stuff. Yeah. They revealed some details on the tiers of the battle passes. And I think the first season is going to begin in mid to late July. They have 4 seasons per year, right? So tied to financial quarters. 2 paid battle pass options for Diablo 4. So there's a premium pass, which is $10 US, and an accelerated pass, which is $25 US. The accelerated pass is geared towards anyone who starts the season late, who will then retroactively unlock tiers for a boost. And then there are also some other perks that will be unlocked through the season, like unique items and powers, which will kind of catch up to your base game after you finish the campaign and all that kind of stuff. So in addition to the battle pass stuff, they're also going to be doing a rotating assortment of gear for Diablo 4's cash shop. So there's going to be like a microtransaction shop. If you've played Path of Exile before, you know what that is. Press the M key's the I can't remember what key it was, but anyway, you will press a key and a store will open, and there will be stuff that seems enticing, that is enticing. And if you have the money, man, you're going to be really tempted. But you might rather not want to be tempted, and you might not want to fall. You might not want to feel like this is just a big gambling experience. So you might stay away from it. Yeah. Anyway, I don't like these passes. I don't think they're good for. I don't think they're good for long-term success of a game. I think, Path of Exile has proven that they can be very successful with them. I think that they're fantastic long-term revenue and cash flow generators. But for me personally, who can get like, I can really fall for those kind of things in a really bad way and spend too much money on them. I really don't like them, and I where I have the fortitude and the willpower to avoid it, I'll just straight up I just won't play, man, so that I don't fall into those kind of traps. I'll just go play something else that doesn't try to fucking scum me out of money. That's Diablo. That is all I have to say on Diablo. I had a little thing here on Capcom that I wanted to talk to. So this is the other thing, is Capcom did their year-end results recently. They did an announcement for it. So their fiscal year ends March 31st, 2023, and did. And so they announced, well, here's the headline. Capcom confirms record number of game sales as share price hits all-time high. The publisher announced a sixth consecutive year of record high profit at all levels. This is out of Andy Robinson from VGC, Video Games Chronicle, but also this is from the Business Wire, which is basically a company press release, basically. So from that Business Wire, they said for the year ended March 31st, 2023, Capcom had sold 41.7 million games covering 12 months. So that's from April 2022 to March 2023. And the year-over-year comparison there is a bit wonky, but it's compared to 32.6 million games sold for the year ended March 31st, 2022. And I say wonky because it makes me think of there's a tweet I saw recently from Matt Piscatella, who's the executive director and a video game analyst at Circana. And he said that, an analyst looking only at year-over-year comparisons and not the pre-pandemic baseline trend is doing it wrong, as is anyone who thought that the pandemic engagement or purchasing peaks would or could or should have been sustained. So take that as a caveat, but year-over-year, when you're looking at these Capcom sales, looks like a 27% increase. I don't have any other prior year data on copies sold, but what you can do is you can take a look at the share price instead, because in theory the share price should be positively correlated with copies sold, because the major thing that's going to drive their revenue is game sales of games. And so share prices will tend to be higher when there are more sales of games, right? And so converting to USD at current rates, because I can't be bothered to look at each individual date and find the closing balance rate. I'm not going to do that. So at April 1st, 2020, the share price at open was $12.43. So this is, I'm looking at the Japanese stock exchange there. So these are all yen, but I've translated them into current rate US dollar. So April 1st, 2020, $12.43. April 1st, 2021, they went up to $27.26 a share. April 1st, 2022, down to $22.14 per share. And then April 1st, 2023, all the way up to $35.21 US per share. And climbing, most recently buffeted by Resident Evil Remake. Yeah. So, also kind of hilarious. I pulled a business profile from a financial services insights company called Refinitiv. And here's what they had to say on Capcom. Capcom Co. Limited mainly engages in digital contents business, amusement facility business, and others. The company operates in 3 segments. The digital content segment develops and sells household games and online games and contents for cell phones. The amusement facility segment operates stores that set up game machine. The amusement equipment segment develops, manufactures, and sells game machine, which were sold for store operators. The company also involves the character-related license business, with one S. So, what? So yeah, that description is kind of sus. Although, like, I mean, I think they're close to what it actually is with their, right. They have games, they have arcades, like game development and game sales, arcade business, basically, like arcade machines and that kind of stuff. And then they have like some within games. There's also mobile as well. Yeah, that's what it looks like. And then also a segment that looks to license the intellectual properties. So those are kind of the three things there. But the Business Wire, has it better, right? So Capcom, they're a leading worldwide developer, publisher, and distributor of interactive entertainment for game consoles, PC, handheld, and wireless devices. Founded in 1983, they've created hundreds of games, including groundbreaking franchises such as Resident Evil, Monster Hunter, Street Fighter, Mega Man, Devil May Cry, and Ace Attorney. They maintain operations in the US, in the UK, in Germany, France, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, and Tokyo, with their corporate headquarters in Osaka, Japan. I will say that they used to have an office in Vancouver for a while, which was shut down in 2018 by Capcom headquarters, and they laid off 158 people. And I found a Global News, which is a Canadian outlet, Global News publication on it, and that move was to cancel a bunch of projects that office was working on and to focus their projects in Japan. And that particular news piece I don't like to see because I am Canadian. So when Canadian businesses or Canadian subsidiaries of other parents shut down, I don't like to see it. But also that company started out as Blue Castle Games Inc., which shout out Blue Castle Games. Blue Castle Games Inc., founded by Robert Barrett on July 4th, 2005. They worked on MLB games. So they put out the Bigs and Major League Baseball 2K8 in 2007. And then also MLB Front Office Manager and the Bigs 2 in 2009. And then they were known for the Dead Rising games. So they did Dead Rising 2 and some other like related Dead Rising 2 properties in 2010. And soon after that point, that's when Capcom came in and bought them. And then they got renamed to Capcom Vancouver. And then from 2011 onwards, they worked on more Dead Rising titles. Dead Rising 3, Collection, Dead Rising 4. They also did some mobile stuff for Puzzle Fighter. And then Capcom Japan decided to pull the plug and canceled. There was a project called Knights of Aegis and Dead Rising 5, which was canceled when the studio shut down. And so now, looking at Capcom overall, they'll hit their 40th anniversary in June 2023. And they pull in almost $1 billion US in sales, which, when it comes down to net income, it's almost 270 million US in net income. And they employ about 3,200 people. But, for them, it wasn't a case of that they were doing super well before the pandemic and have now struck gold out of the other side. They were struggling before the pandemic. And so if you look at the 5-year trend on their normalized net income, which is basically just net income after extraordinary items that might have happened in that year that are not usual things. So that gives a better picture of what the business is actually capable and usually generating in terms of profit, and then other ways to look at it for how much cash they're actually getting. And so that trend, basically in 2019, they had about 94 million US in normalized net income. In 2020, it climbed up to 117 million, 183 million in 2021, 236 million in 2022, and then finally 272 million in 2023. And so when you look at the Business Wire that's saying that they've achieved 41.7 million units sold, it's being driven by the release of new major successful titles. So you have Resident Evil Remake, Monster Hunter Rise, Sunbreak, and the pushing of existing IP in various storefronts. They have also expanded their earnings by leveraging their IP in movies, in character merchandise, and in esports, which, I mean, like, this is like every single publisher, developer is looking at how to do this now. It's like Nintendo with the Mario movies, Sony with combining all of their IPs, all that kind of stuff. Their arms race type of dealership of IPs to different production companies. So when you look at what's been driving the growth over the 5-year trend, it's the games, right? So going back to October 2, 2018, that's when the last original Mega Man came out. And I mean, it was successful, but it didn't pop off. Right. And that was basic, like, looking at it, that was basically it for 2018. Then you look at 2019, they did Resident Evil triple pack for the Nintendo Switch, which that thing comboed Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6 on cartridge. They had a game called Shinsekai Into the Depths, a mobile game. They had a game called Teppen, which is also a mobile card type of game. And then they had Devil May Cry 5 and Resident Evil 2 remake, I think. I think that's what that is. Then in 2020, they had Rockman X Dive, another mobile game, Mega Man Zero ZX Legacy Collection, Snoopy Puzzle Journey, another mobile game, Monster Hunter Raiders, another mobile game. Then in 2020, Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection, Capcom Arcade Stadium, Street Fighter Duel, Resident Evil 3 Remake, Resident Evil Resistance, which was a weird multiplayer online game that was bundled together with Resident Evil 3 Remake. And in 2021, they did Ace Attorney, Monster Hunter Stories 2, Devil May Cry Pinnacle of Combat, a mobile game, Resident Evil Village, and Monster Hunter Rise. Resident Evil Village, which particularly stood out. And then in 2022, it was Resident Evil, I think, Reverse, Capcom Arcade, and the Fighting Collections. So this like continuous or progressively bigger and bigger, trend of bigger and bigger hits as they come out, kind of culminating in this year where they threw out, Resi 4 Remake, which has been absolutely gangbusters, selling absolutely gangbusters. And they're looking forward to next year, or the current fiscal year, the end of this current fiscal year that they're in, breaking the records again. So now they're projecting over $1 billion in sales for this for the total of this current fiscal year. And I can see it happening because this year is going to be buffeted by Street Fighter 6, which is probably going to just make a goddamn killing, because that game's looking like it's going to be really good. But it's not just that, right? So they have Street Fighter 6 that's coming out in June. In July, they're supposed to have a original first-person shooter called Exoprimal. So that'll be something there. Another, it's like a big budget shooter that should drive some sort of sales for them. There's also a game called Pragmata, which uses the Resident Evil engine. And it's another original IP, a mysterious sci-fi game that follows a man in a spacesuit, a little girl, and a robotic cat, or a whole holographic robot cat. And you're kind of journeying through the end of the world. And I think it's like a space type of thing. So that's in 2023, calendar 2023, I think, but no particular date given. That's just a release window of 2023. But when you look at all of that, you see that they have big bangers that are coming, and so you can say, okay, yeah, this it looks like they're going to have another really successful year. So that's the thing I had on Capcom, and that takes us to like the final thing that I have here, which is really like, I mean, I've been going on long enough. I don't have too much on this, but this is Zelda. This Zelda game reviews really well. It looks really good. But yeah, I don't know, man. There's also these kind of these rumors out of Sharp that have been circulating around. There's a certain aspect of the fan base in Zelda, or with this particular Zelda game anyway, that are thinking that it's like an instant shoe-in for the game of the year. And I don't, I won't put it there immediately, because I think that there are definitely other things that can be in the running for that, including Resident Evil 4 remake. I think remakes should be considered for game of the year if they do something substantially different from what that original thing was, in a way that creates a new experience for the player that brings a certain level of enjoyment or joy, like a wow factor for the experience. It should absolutely be considered for game of the year. And I think so that like Resident Evil 4 should be in consideration for game of the year. I think that Street Fighter 6 should also probably be in consideration, but we'll just have to wait and see what that game looks like in terms of broad appeal. But I think that it will have broad appeal. If it does, I think that it can definitely be in the running for it. So yeah, but anyway, back to this Tears of the Kingdom. What I thought about was, just thinking about how when Breath of the Wild came out, right, it came out on Wii U as well, and then about a year later they dropped the Switch, right? I think some of the press conferences that Nintendo has been having recently, they've been trying to close down that line of thinking on, wait, does Tears of the Kingdom just signal that there's going to be a new console within a year? But there were rumors that came out of Sharp, who has been saying that they're supplying LCD displays for new consoles, and that they've been involved in the R&D stage. And so after Nintendo's confirmation that the Switch's demand, so the demand for the Nintendo Switch is slowing down, which makes sense. It's an old system, and people are starting to get the expectation that there's going to be a new console at some point. Sharp has also confirmed that they're supplying LCD displays for a new gaming console, quote unquote, although it obviously refrained from going into any specific details. According to Bloomberg and via VGC, Sharp CEO Robert Wu confirmed that Sharp is working with an unnamed company on the development of a new gaming console since the R&D stage, and that it plans to launch pilot LCD panel production lines for the device this fiscal year. The device in question might not be a successor to the Switch, and the unnamed company might not be Nintendo, but Sharp has been known to work with Nintendo in the past. Most recently, Nintendo partnered with Sharp to increase production of the Nintendo Switch, and when they did that that new model, right? I think that's the OLED model that they're referring to here. And so for fiscal year ending March 2024, Nintendo has lowered their forecast for Switch sales, landing on 15 million. I think that's units. Yeah. And they currently stand at 125 million units, which is above the Game Boy and the Wii, but significantly below the Nintendo DS. So we've talked about this before. Like, I think that the position I took on this was that we'd hear an announcement on the next console in the second half of next year, and then a new console itself would come in the second half of the following year. So we'll hear by 2024 and see something by 2025. I think that gives Nintendo enough time to build up the demand for the new product, build up the kind of hype cycle on it, and then also launch it at a time where families and kids and all of that have time off and are kind of chomping at the bit to play some first party Nintendo stuff. And, you know, I mean, like it's been a while since we had a Mario on a new console. So yeah, that's where I'm going with it. That's what I'm thinking about when I look at all of this. When I look at Tears of the Kingdom and I look at Nintendo and what they're doing, I'm looking forward to a new console. You know, I don't need another Breath of the Wild. I already have one of those. Give me something that's radically different. You know, that doesn't mean give me something that you crank out within a year that, you know, is like, just make some like spin off and do some weird shit and come out with something. But that means like, you know, just go back to what is, you know, like go back to the drawing board and come up with something different again, like you have before. And give it to me on a new console. And I think then I'll be ready to jump back in. So yeah, that's all I have on Zelda. And I think that's going to do it for today. That's it. We're done. Man, I keep saying that I might slow down the production of this, but I think that I will actually do that now. I usually do my planning, my research and writing and review and filming and editing all throughout like Wednesday to Sunday, generally speaking. But like all of that basically leaves Monday and Tuesday to play games, and then to like start again on the production cycle. And so it's just like, man, to manage that and to balance it like with everything else that goes on has been really, really challenging. Like it's really satisfying. It's really fun to do. I enjoy it thoroughly. But there are other projects that I want to work on and other things that I want to do. And so I think maybe if I move it over to a bi-weekly kind of thing, then that will give me more time to look into particular topics that I want to look into, slowly look into those, give me more time to play the actual games that I want to play so that I'm ready to talk about those in a more kind of fulsome way. And then also give me more time to do some more, you know, editing for other people that are out there in our communities, you know, and also do some more restreaming for the Bazaar channel, for example. So I think that's where I'm going to take it. That's the thought for now. And of course, you know, when I go back to school, and I will go back to school, then it's going to be a whole other story. Then maybe, I don't know, I'll have to see what to do, because I know for sure the one thing that I cannot do is get burnt out, because that is absolute crap. So yeah, that's going to do for today. Yeah. For games, I still got to figure out what I'm doing. I've got a couple of other things on the go, but they're like, a few of them are just paused. I'm paused on Minecraft Legends. I really want to get back into Wolong. I recently did a restream of 80 cross keys for the Bazaar channel. So I need to go edit up those videos. Speaking of the Bazaar, there will be Extra Life coming up in July, so look forward to that, mid-July. And I'll be helping out with the stream. That's going to do it. As always, thank you so much for watching, for listening, whether here live or on the recordings. Until next time, take care, enjoy your gaming, and I will catch you on the flip side.